I am a 21-year licensed clinical social worker out here in Washington, D.C. Area. And so I work with young folks and adults. The very first day, our president had signed an executive order saying that there are only two genders, male and females, only two.
You said, I think the government has said that there are two gender, and I don't think you agree with that.
First, when we talk about gender, we're talking about a very expansive concept of how people feel in their bodies, who they are, right? How they exist. It's not necessarily how you show up or how you appear, not even about your body parts. You can't just have two ways of existing, right? And I think that outside of American culture, there have been plenty of cultures throughout the world that have proven that there's more than two genders.
Is gender a political construct or biology?
Is a social construct. It is made by the society or the societies that exist. It's not necessarily, again, how you look, but it's how your body is functioning.
When you look at the human body, you look at the human reproductive organ, for example, the testicles, or you look at the penis, or you look at the vagina. Are these social construct or are these biology? Tell me a bit about what is going on there today. We are here to just talk about ourselves.
Oh, okay, sure. How am I? I'm okay. It's starting to be consistently warm here. I'm in Temple Hills, Maryland, and so I'm about 5 minutes from DC, so I'm not too far from the action. But I'm doing okay. My kiddos with their parents, with my parents. Summer has started. We're all getting into the season of like cookouts and like family time and reunions. So yeah, things are pretty good. I could say that things are pretty good.
What do you plan for this summer?
I plan for the summer. So, when you have a kiddo, your life revolves around whatever they got going on. So we have a summer school, we have summer activities, we might do some amusement parks. But the summer for me has really been about like, I have a book coming out. So I'm like figuring out where to go and like getting excited about possibly doing a book tour. So yeah, it's a summer of like possibility and creativity. So I think that's exciting.
Lovely. So there is a lot of things happening this summer. There is a lot of plan and programs and events and
Yes, absolutely. So, and one thing I love around here, so we have like our Parks and Rec where they, help do all the like community events and like they get, and they like do something, certain special stuff for the children. And my kid loves being outside. I not so much. I like being inside, but being with the kiddo like helps you like go to the library events and like go to the carnival events, and so I guess you get a little cotton candy too here and there, but it's yeah, we do a lot of really cool stuff outside.
what do you really spend your time on? Tell me a bit about your professional life today.
Sure. So I am a 21-year licensed clinical social worker out here in Washington, D.C. Area. And so I work with young folks and adults, particularly around like sex and gender. So I'm a certified sexual health educator. And so I talk to other people about kind of like how to live their best life in the bodies that they live in, and then also like create healthy relationships with each other. So I'm a therapist. I also have worked in academia. So a lot of my consultant work has been working with organizations around either being more inclusive, being more diverse in either their faculty or how they're working with clients. And then right now, like I said, right now I have a book coming out in about 2 months that's based on my dissertation that's really centered on burnout and how do we as administrators protect people who are doing the really hard work of working with other people who need assistance, whether it's peer support, whether it's clinical social work, whether it's education. How can we do the best we can in order to work with people who are in the community? So yeah, my work is, and work has shifted. I think here, particularly in America, especially with the new administration, we just have to do a lot of shifting and moving because the work has to look different because there are certain things we can do, certain things we can say. Schools are changing, so it's not like there's the same opportunities that are available. So there's a lot of pivoting going on right now for a lot of us who are doing some of this work. But I can say that the work, that doesn't mean that the thing doesn't still need to happen, right? We still need to make sure spaces are diverse, make sure that they're equitable. But I think for me, a lot of my work is just how can I do the best I can in order to help move everybody forward and being able to accommodate for all types of people. So yeah, it's busy, but busy in a way that it hasn't been before.
So when you say things have shifted around, can you tell us more about that?
Absolutely. So, of course, everybody knows that we have gotten a new president. So, and oh, thanks.
Congratulations!
It is.
Congratulations!
We are on year two of what it seems like forever. Like to even think that it's just 2 years is like madness to me over here. So with the new administration that has come in, previously, of course, we have a two-party system, so Democrats and Republicans. So since the Republicans have come in and taken over the House and taken over the Senate, and really have been, they kind of started off hitting the ground running. So the very first day, our president had signed an executive order saying that there are only two genders. There's male and female. It's only two. And even though that seems like one small thing to attack on your first day, it kind of have a domino effect. So it affects the way that people see healthcare. It affects the way that people are taught in schools. It affects the way that people have access to certain care systems. And so that kind of started the ball rolling of taking other rights, or maybe I should say restricting other rights of certain people. And so once that shift has happened, at the time I was the executive director of accreditation for the Council on Social Work Education. So once I was kind of in that mode of helping schools stay accredited and standardized amongst the work that they were doing. Once those executive orders come in, there's starting to be questions around, tell me a little bit about what you're teaching the students. Tell me a little bit about how you're spreading information within your organizations and your systems about inclusivity. And they don't like that. So a lot of things have been dismantled. We're losing a lot of centers. We're losing a lot of programs, a lot of things you can't say in the classroom even. So there's a lot of faculty and teachers that are afraid to teach certain content in schools. Yeah, like I said, healthcare is really restricted in certain ways. So as time has gone along, we've just really been stripped of a lot of things that help us make our society more diverse. And it's due to how our government is at the current time. And I think a lot of people are waiting for just like, let's hold out and just wait for the tide to turn. But for me, and working in like healthcare and LGBTQ rights and helping people get the help that they need, I think waiting is too late, right? Like I think that we're all really need to pay attention to what's going on. And even though it seems like it's focused on one particular group of people, it's going to end up affecting all of us in the end. So yeah, that's what's happening here. Just a little bit.
All right. All right. I see. I see. So you said there are some information that are not able to get into the school because parents are saying, okay, what information are you sharing with the kids? So what information are you really sharing with the kids? What information are they not allowed to get into the
Sure.
community?
So one thing that has been a really targeted topic has been LGBTQ people rights, healthcare, just their existence in general. So, and when I say LGBTQ, I mean lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, plus queer folks. And so, whether we're talking about their sexual orientation, whether we're talking about their gender, schools, whether it has been K through 12, which is like our younger folks, or whether we're talking about college age, uh, those school systems have decided, depending on where you lie, kind of on the political spectrum or belief system, maybe I should also say that, people are like, we shouldn't be teaching kids that. Right? We shouldn't be talking about that in school. And as a sexual health educator, I understand why people say some of those things. What also I say is, well, if you're educated on them, wouldn't you want to know more than just be ignorant to the thing that to a group of people who exist? And so, yeah, those are things have been restricted either within young schools for younger kids, or how people are being taught after in college or beyond, grad school even. And so, yeah, those things are being restricted, particularly when we're talking about race and slavery or people who have been enslaved. They are limiting the language around how you are talking to younger kids about certain historical things. So we can't say, I think there's a conversation around when we're talking about folks who are enslaved, we're gonna say that they came here willingly, like oh, like it's just like like a work study program. Like they just really take a lot of the intensity, the trauma, the history, right, the general history out of the things that we are being taught, and it's to keep us ignorant to certain things that are happening. And if you don't teach the next generation, that generation won't teach the next generation, right? So there's an elimination of information that's happening here.
Do you think there is a logical reason why they are skeptical about teaching children about this item that you listed? Okay, let's focus on the history just now. Why would they not want to teach the children what have happened? Is there any reason to be fearful on their part?
You want like an answer or like my thought process on what's what's happening? I
I want your thought process here.
Yeah, I think my thought process is it is the more that we can erase, sanitize information that we are giving to the next generation of people, then it's easier to have a certain level of control, right? It's easier to make things seem like the way that they're not supposed to. So if we talk about, for example, there's only two genders and there's not these other options of beautiful people that exist, it's easier for me to convince you that transgender people don't exist and that they're bad people. If I just teach you that people who are enslaved or people who came here under duress and trauma and force, are people who wanted to do it, or people who like were happy to build this land. It's easier to convince people that we could just do it again, right? Slavery wasn't that bad. At least they got somewhere to stay and they got land, right? Like there is this easier way to convince you that the traumas that you're experiencing are not that bad. All right. It's easier to convince you that education is not important if we just get computers to do it for you. Right. It's easier to convince you certain things if I can just if I have the power to remove that information from you. So, yeah, it's really, for me, my thought process is like, it's just a way of control. Like I am a huge proponent of like education. I have books all over this house. I love reading. I love educating. I want to know the reasons why. And for what's happening now is like they're taking out the reasons why of things, and convincing you that it's not that bad. But I think that for me in the future, it's just to convince you that there's another truth that exists, in order for me to control you and make you do things that I want you to do. So I think it's about control. You allow people to be ignorant, and if you just convince people that things are okay, then they don't have to ask any questions, right? So I think some of it is just, yeah, I don't want you to have that information, so I can control what you're doing.
It's all about the
Yeah,
control.
yeah.
Yeah. Both in the religious circle, in politics, in economy.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Mhm.
that is a key word there. Okay, tell me about the gender. You said I think the government said that there are two gender, and I don't think you agree with that. Can you expand on that?
Sure. So there is so first when we talk about gender, we're talking about a very expansive concept of how people feel in their bodies, who they are, right? How they exist. It's not necessarily how you show up or how you appear, not even about your body parts, but it's really about like how you are as an existence as a human being. That could be a man, a woman, be a person who's transgender, a person who's non-binary, all sorts of ways that we label our bodies. But we do that, right? That's a social construct in order to help, again, control us and put us in categories. And so when people talk about there's only two genders, it's incorrect, because there are billions of people on this planet. And for one, you can't just have two ways of existing, right? And I think that outside of American culture, there have been plenty of cultures throughout the world that have proven that there's more than two genders. Whether we're talking about Native American folks and we're talking about two-spirit folks, whether we're talking about certain folks that are seen as more spirited and they're seen as more wise within either their groups that their identity, or whether we're talking about within their countries. Plenty of people have different categories for different genders. What is happening here in the United States is that they are saying there are only two that exist. That's it, man and woman. And if you are not in these categories of these two people, then we are going to find ways to take your rights, ultimately so we can eliminate you, right? Ultimately so we can take away your rights, your ability to live, your ability to get health care, to take care of yourself, to take care of your families. We do not see you as people. And that's harmful, right? Because it causes people to die. We have one state here, Florida, that are taking so many rights away from particularly transgender folks, that they're migrating from one part of the country to another. I have folks that I work with in the clinical world who they have to, in order to get certain medications, they have to cross state lines. It is really like, even though there are it's really bad. Maybe I should say that. I can just emphasize it's really bad. So when I talk about kind of the battle of making sure that everybody is being respected, some of that starts from the root of, if you do not look a certain way, if you do not act a certain way, if you are not dressing a certain way, we are going to persecute you and make sure that we take away your rights so you do not exist. And so that's part of the battle that I'm fighting, of just helping make sure that all people are able to get the health care that they need, because it will affect all of us, whether we're talking about hormone replacement surgery, whether we're talking about gender affirmation surgery. All those things are used by all people. Doesn't matter who you identify. So I think sometimes we focus on, well, if we just focus on this one group of people and get rid of them, everything will be fine. But that's not true, right? We all need health care, right? We all need safety. We all need housing. We all need food. And so just eliminating that one group of people does not solve a problem. It just exacerbates a larger problem that's going to affect everybody.
All right. Thank you so much for that clarification. All right. Now you're going to have to treat me as somebody who just try to understand. Okay. So I asked all this question because I'm curious. Okay.
Absolutely, yeah.
All right. So is gender a political construct or biology? Can you specify that for
Sure.
us?
So gender particularly is a social construct. It is made by the society or the societies that exist, whomever we're talking about, right? They have decided that if you look a certain way, if you act a certain way, if your body is a certain way, that you are in a certain social category. So whether it is, again, man, woman, non-binary, transgender, cisgender, however you identify, we put you in those categories. I always like to tell people that gender is about how you move, right? How you move through the world. It's not about your body parts. And so that's when you said biology, that's when we're talking about sex. So we are talking about parts of your body that make up who you are, whether it's your hormones, your chromosomes, your genitals. It's not necessarily, again, how you look, but it's how your body is functioning within the world. So those are two different things. We're talking about gender, we're talking about social constructs. If we are talking about sex, we are talking about how the body is constructed. That too, how we label bodies are also kind of a social construct, but there is a labeling that happens in terms of, like, XX chromosomes, XY chromosomes, having a vagina, having a penis, having testes. Those are ways that we label our bodies, but they shouldn't necessarily be ways that we label how we identify and move through the world.
All right. Thank you so much for
Yeah.
that. So when we talk about sexual reproductive organ, we're not really talking about biology. We're talking about social construct. Is that what you're saying?
When we're talking about homosexuality in terms of attraction to other people, then we're talking about sexual orientation, right? So that's also the confusing thing of like all these things have different categories. So when we're talking about attraction, we are talking about who we love, who we're intimate with, who we want to have sex with, who we want to be in partnership with, who we think are, who we think are fine. Like those are things, those are how people are relating to other people. So we would consider that again sexual orientation, homosexuality, heterosexuality, being gay, being queer, the ways that people label how they want to seek other folks in community and in relationship.
All right. So I was actually like asking, when you look at the human body, you look at the human reproductive organ, for example, the testicles, or you look at the penis, or you look at the vagina. Are these social construct or are these biology?
I would say about it's biology. Like it's your body does combine its cells and does its magic to make the parts. I think where the social construct comes in is our labeling, and when we label, we are labeling certain body parts. I will say with a certain level of power and privilege than other body parts, right? So when we see folks who have a penis, for example, or when we are labeling people, when we see people have a penis, we are usually labeling that person a man, right? Like those two things come together. And something that we talk about in sexual health land is like there is a certain level of power that people with penises or a penis has when we are talking about sex, when we're talking about sexual dynamics, attraction, things like that. Think about when, the construct that we talk about is virginity all the time. So a person cannot be, there is no equivalent to virginity for a man than there is for a woman, right? So when a woman turns a certain age or when she has sex for a certain time, having sex one time makes you not a virgin anymore, which sometimes makes you unclean. What is the way that you become not a virgin anymore? You have to have a man to do it. Right. So there's certain aspects of the ways that we either relate to each other or see certain bodies that have more power and privilege than others. We are seeing that a lot here, particularly when we're talking about healthcare in terms of like abortion care, or we're talking about just women's care and pregnancy in general, and the right for the women to carry or not to carry. Those rules are made for people with a uterus, right? Those are people who are made who can carry children. Those are things that are made for people who can have periods, but the people who are making those rules don't have those body parts, right? Those are men who are making who are having those experiences or that are making those rules. We don't have a lot of rules around how do we regulate penises in this country. We just don't. We might have one or two for a drug or a medicine, but they not over here saying, "Hey, you can't have X, Y, and Z for people with penises," right? So there for the understanding around bodies. I wish we lived in a world where none of this mattered, that we just cared about being well and getting the things that we needed. But there is history that charges that certain body parts just have power over others, and it's supposed to always be that way, right? There's no breaking from that. There's no, it's always been like that in history. We've just always really doubled down on that particular concept, and it's really hurting all of us, really. Even people with penises, and not even that they have it great over there. They're having a hard time too, but we are all doing so much regulating, and it's preventing us from basically being free in the bodies that we live in.
All right. Another clarification.
Sure.
When you say gender, are you talking about male and female, man and woman? Is that what it means? Is that another word for it? Or because I'm sure a lot of people are confused about the terminology that we use. Maybe they are even intentional to confuse
Yeah.
people. So when you say a man and a woman, is that a construct? Is that a biology? When you say male and female, is that what we mean by gender? Can you clarify that part for us?
Gotcha. Ooh, you want me to teach a class? I'm so excited. Okay, I love doing this. So yes, I can teach you the difference. So when we are talking, let's start with sex. We'll start with When we are born, when we come out of our mother's womb and they're like, there's a baby, that when we're looking in between somebody's legs and saying there's a penis, there's a vagina here, we are talking about sex, right? We are just talking about the body parts that people have. We are also talking about intersex folks. I also want to bring them into the room. So you also have people who are born with a certain combination of body parts, whether they have internal testes, whether their clitoris is enlarged and it looks like a penis, whether you just have different hormones. Bodies are bodies, right? They're constructed however the way that the universe wants us to put those body parts together. So that's sex, hormones, chromosomes, the way that their body's constructed, that is sex. And we're just thinking about bodies. Then we move into gender. We don't necessarily know what a person's gender is until they're farther down the road. So they're like 3 or 4. That doesn't mean that they don't understand who they are, right? That doesn't mean that they're not going to pick a certain color that they like, or that they're not going to wear certain clothes or find a certain social group to be in. It's not about that. It's just about who they think that they are as a person. So what we like to say is what's in between your head and not what's in between your legs. So thinking about gender is man, woman, transgender, genderqueer, non binary. These are the labels that people choose for themselves. What we usually get confused is that when we start talking about gender expression, the way that we express ourselves, painting our nails, having a beard, having long or short hair, wearing a dress, wearing a suit, having a deep voice, having a high voice. Those are gender markers that we have to determine who people are. What we do a lot is we confuse those two together. So what happens if you have a person with their nails painted and short hair, right? What happens if you have a person that has a beard and wears a dress? How do you label those folks, right? So some of it is about we don't want to be confused, right? I don't want to be confused. If you have painted nails and long hair, you go in that category. If you have a beard and a penis, you go in this category. And that's just not how things work, right? That's just not how human bodies work. That's just not how anybody's bodies work in any society. But depending on where you are, we label those people based on how they express themselves. So when you talk about like what is biological and what is social, it's all a social construct, right? Somebody sat down and labeled these people these ways and out of control. But when we're talking about biology, we're talking about sex, how the body is made. And what we have to do as humans is not label those body parts with certain personal attributes, right? So just because you have a beard doesn't mean that you can't be a man. There are plenty of women, cisgender women, that have beards, right? That's biology. That is biology, right? That's the body. But labeling it as something, as a societal meeting, that's a human doing that we are doing in order to control folks.
When you look at a young baby that is giving birth or just come to this world, and in say maybe 2 or 3 years, do you classify these little children as male, female, heterosexual? Do you classify them as transgender, even maybe when they are like 1 or 2 years old?
How can we so if we're talking about that young, what we already do is once babies are born and we see what genitals they have, for example, this is where we start labeling folks. It's really about what we can see. The issue with that is that sometimes what we see is not as clear as what we assume it to be. That's why I'm also talking about intersex folks. So our assumption is that you see a penis, that's going to be a boy. You see a vagina, that's going to be a girl. But if you look and the body parts are configured in a different way than what we assume something's wrong with that, right? We're just like, that's not right. We need to do more testing to figure out what two categories to put this one person in. And so when I say like gender, children don't necessarily feel or exist or be in a gender that are choosing a box. When I say that, that's because they're starting to be socialized, right? So here in America, maybe around like about 1.5, 2, 3, we're trying to put you in a daycare. So we put you in a daycare. We pay a lot of money for it. We put you in a daycare, especially because parents are going back to work. They're not going to be as available. We need to make money to live, X, Y, and Z. So kids now are going to school, right? They're going to a certain place. kids see other kids playing with certain things, grouping themselves together. Maybe a group of folks who look a certain way come over here, they might be boys. A group of people come over here, they might be girls, right? So then you might have an adult that says, like, well, you're a boy or you have a penis, you should be playing with those folks, right? Now we're starting to separate folks based on how they exist. So when we talk about gender coming in young, how do people realizing their gender at a young age, some of that is socialization, some of that is just kids are around other kids and they're trying to find kids to be and exist with. But in terms of how they think about themselves, kids just want to exist in general. My kid very early on, my kid's a loner, so it was kind of hard to understand what kids he wanted to be with. But eventually, after watching TV and reading books and being in school, my kid was just like, I'm a boy. And I was just like, all right, well, great, fantastic. And so that it sometimes it's just as easy as that. But one thing that we are having a hard time with is when kids do not present the way that we assume that they should, or be in the social construct that they assume that they should, then we push them to do something else. And that's where the discomfort come in. So do we know if they're homosexual, queer, gay at a young age? Really, no. Right? Until the kid says so, no, we don't know who they're attracted to because kids shouldn't really be attracted to anybody at that. You're young, right? We're not talking about relationship. We're only talking about how bodies
All right.
exist.
All right. So it appeared to me now that the controversy that we have is actually a social construct in the sense of who do you want to go to bed with?
Yeah, right. Yes, yes.
That is not, it doesn't appear to me to be biology. Because if it were biology in the sense of if it the way that it naturally is, we would know that from childhood in the sense that you don't need to be 2 years old before we can say, okay, a baby is born. This is male or this is female. But the confusion now comes when maybe somebody say, okay, I choose to be male or I choose to be female. I am yet not clear how we got into this confusion.
Oh, how we got to this confusion? Well, I think some of the confusion just really lies in the fact that people don't want to think outside of those two boxes, right? Like, I think if we just sit for a moment and just say that those boxes don't exist, right? That kids, no matter what they're born with, can be whomever they want to be. That if you wanted to walk out in like a tube top and a dress, you could do so without being persecuted, right? Like people would just see you as a human being. If we can dream enough and be created enough to just realize that those two things don't have to exist, it's actually not a problem. Right? Like it's actually less of a problem than what we make it. But again, because labeling and putting people in categories and we deem certain parts to be more powerful than others, it's important to put people in categories in order to control them. You can't have somebody in power and not control other people, right? Like those two things have to exist in the same space. And so if I am saying that a having person or a man is all powerful, right? If we people who we deem men are powerful and they have privilege, you have to have a community or a group of people to control. And some of that are people who are women or femmes or femininity. It's just the construct that we have in this world, unfortunately, that we just won't let go. And I think there's so much power in letting go for the both of us, for everybody. If we just let go that the fact that there's only two genders and there's only two categories people can be in, it would just be a lot easier for everybody to exist.
I think that is what I would say. That when you give birth to a child, we can say this is a male or this is a female because at least we can see that. No, in our place they say you don't say a man have big brocos. You don't make that kind of argument for a long time. All you just need to do remove the cloth. We can see it.
Yeah, right,
You
right,
see.
right, 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 right. And people are like, I
so,
want to. And then when you're an adult, people are like, well, I want to see, and it's just like, but it's also privacy, right? Or it's just like, just trust, just trust that I'm an adult, right? We don't have to look at my body parts. So yeah, you're right.
and I also think that the politics, maybe the politics shouldn't be played too much role in who a person go to bed with. That should be a private thing. I don't know why there is so much politicking about it. If you choose to, okay, what I'm saying by that, it means if two adults decide to do what they like, they are both mature, that is their thing. That shouldn't become the headline. Nobody, I shouldn't care about that. If you like, go hug a tree. That is you. I'm not interested. So I don't know why there is a lot of politicking about it. I don't understand it. Again, I'm just curious.
Yeah, I think it goes back to the control thing. And some of it here is religious. Let me also in context, because it's not that persecution isn't happening elsewhere in the world, right? Like I think there's other examples that we can say of like LGBTQ people or gay people not having their rights. So apart from that, here in America, a part of the persecution that we're having for those group of folks is religious. It is spiritual based and is religious based. And it is in Christianity there is only a man and there's only a woman. And a part of that union, the reason for a part of that union is having babies, right? Is expanding the family, is growing the harvest, right? Is expanding who those people are. And so what is happening is that there is a lower birth rate that is happening here. People are moving away from religion. They're not believing in Christianity or going to church or going to certain places as often as they used to. And so now there's a panic. There's like a, oh my gosh, the group that we are cultivating is leaving, right? Those people are not believing it anymore. They're challenging, and these kids are challenging religion left and right over here, as they should, right? People should have questioned. But I think where we are having a problem is that we are letting go of history. We're having an issue letting go of history. And so the more that people are like, nope, there has to be two genders, or you have to get married to a man. Why don't you want to have kids, right? There's this expansive conversation around having kids here. And there's a belief system that if you are queer, if you're a part of the LGBTQ community, you can't have kids and you can't have a family, which is not true. And I will say, as a person who identifies as queer, I have a lovely 7-year old. And there's a way that those folks can have babies if they want to, but that's not the way that the larger religious folks want to see it happen. And it's yeah, it's a problem. I'm with you. It shouldn't be anybody's business what I'm doing in the bedroom, or you, or anybody. So yeah.
We'll leave that conversation there, maybe for another day. We just touched it a little bit. There is a lot that actually goes on there, but of course, we can also see that there is no confusion when we are giving birth to. We have confusion as we are growing up and begin to identify ourselves and begin to give ourselves different kinds of names. By the way, that is okay for that. Now, we have talked about what you do today. Let's go a little bit about you. This is how we work here. We use a three-part framework, which we call the NBA. The N stands for now, which is what you do now, what is around you. The B stands for before. Before you became who you are, who were you? So take us back a little in this
Okay,
journey.
okay, gotcha. Who am I now? So right now I am identify as a Black queer mother of a very spunky 7-year old. In working land, I am a person who does. I write. I am an academic. I teach. I do education for schools and institutions, particularly around healthcare and helping people stay in the business of caring for other folks as long as possible. So that could be a training, that could be a community event. I'm also a grief counselor and a death doula. So I help people talk about death. I help people cross over to the other side, is the way that I call it. So I like working in the ends of life and in the beginnings of life as well. So that's who I am now. I will say, before I became this person, so I'm originally from Hampton, Virginia, which is very close to Jamestown. My family is from North Carolina and Georgia. And so who was I? I was also a spunky kid that was in the street and played a lot. I read all the time. I have books all over my house. I'm a avid reader, so I love to read. And I was a little rebel, I will say. I was just like I wanted people to have rights. I wanted fairness. I was I fought here and there. I was a little tough cookie, but I was a person younger that I wanted to know everything. Why is that? Tell me about that. No, you can't tell me to shut up. I want to know more. I was that kind of person. And now that you have talked about that framework, I'm like, oh, now I know why. I am who I am. Like I now I get it. Yeah, I was that person. I like comic books. I drew. I like to draw. I love art. I love putting things together. And so yeah, and so now it's just like writing has been a manifestation of that. I paint. I have a painting on my wall that I painted. Like yeah, I was a little creative, spunky person, but I didn't want to take no mess. That was me when I was younger.
All right. So how far back can you think? You were 5, 6 years. What is your earliest memory that you remember?
Yeah, I would say yeah, I would say 5 or 6 years before I lived. My parents had been in their home over 30 years right now. I can remember the house before that, so I would say I was about 4 or 5. Yes.
Tell me what happened there.
Ooh, my dad was in the military. I was in Chicago. We were in Chicago, Illinois at the time, and my dad was in the military. He's in the Air Force, and he got stationed. And yeah, I was a military kid, so I didn't really understand like being in one place too long. Maybe we moved one time before that, but we got to this place, and I didn't know how long we were going to stay. But it was I was 5, so I was able to start school at the appropriate time. But I do remember making friends. Like this was my first like start of like making neighborhood friends, going to school, and it was my brother was younger, so I was kind of like the test dummy, right? It was just like my parents put me out there, and I just kind of figured it out because I'm the oldest. I have a younger brother, and yeah, it wasn't bad. It was just different. I was just a curious kid trying to figure out like what adventure was going to happen next. And eventually, that was our home that we settled in. So my parents still live in that home that I moved in when I was 5 years old. Yeah, that was many moons ago.
And how does it feel to be a 5 years old daughter to a military parent?
At the time, I thought everybody did it. When you're a kid, it's like I was just like, oh, my dad's in the military. Like your dad's not. Like you can't. And people were like, no, and I was so confused because I just thought that was the standard. There was a place when I was younger. I used to take ballet classes, tap dancing classes, and so you go on base to you have to go through the gates and you show your ID and you go so you do all the things. I just thought everybody did that. I thought everybody's dad put on a uniform. I thought everybody's dad left sometimes and came back. I thought everybody's dad came home and took their boots off when they wanted before they ate dinner. I just thought that was the regular thing to do. So when I was 5, I thought it was cool that my dad wore uniforms and stuff like that. I didn't know all the other things, but I was just like, everybody's dad does this. And some moms did it. When I saw some of my friends' mom, they were in the military. I was like, ooh, well, I didn't know women could do it too. That yeah, I thought it was a commonplace.
That's interesting. And you say you were very curious as a child, right?
I was very curious. Yes, I wanted to know everything.
What were you curious about?
Body parts. I wanted to know. I have a younger brother. I remember being curious about like, well, why, how come he can take his shirt off and I can't take my shirt off? I was curious about the ability for girls to do things and boys to do things. So I was also athletic. So like I said, I did tap, jazz. I eventually I started running track. But when I was younger, I played soccer with the boys, and I just didn't understand why the girls didn't want to play. Like I didn't get that either. So people would question me and they're just like, well, how come you're good at this? Or how come you're, because I can just do it. Right. So I was just curious about why rules existed. And if I can't do that, can I break the rule a little bit and do this other thing? That was really me. I was just trying to figure out how I could do what I wanted to do.
Is there any particular story that you remember along with it? Maybe there was something that sort of remained in your memory in this your adolescent age now, growing up, beginning to mingle with people, moving around in your neighborhood. Is there any memory that remained important for you?
I am still my parents still live in that house. So they still it's let me see, I'm 44. And we moved here 40 years ago. 40 years ago. So my parents still live there. I think what is important to me is the aspect of community. I some of those folks still live there. You know, they still live in that neighborhood. I love the fact that I have a kid now and I can take my kid to my old neighborhood and show and talk to my neighbors and say, this is my kid. There's something important about legacy and lineage in that aspect. I think a lot of times we talk about legacy and lineage in terms of like blood family, but I think what's important that that I have kind of dragged with me 40 years later is that it's important to have people in community see you and witness you and observe you. And I teach my kid that too. I'm like, when we walk around the neighborhood, when we greet our neighbors, like that's a part of us being a family together. So that's important to me. My second mom who lived across the street from me, she died, probably 3 years ago. That house and those memories really mean something to me. The people who live across the street who babysat me when I was younger, babysit my kid now. It's legacy and lineage just in a different aspect. I really do love neighborhoods and neighbors and community. Like that is a thing that's important to me.
Thank you so
You're
much for
welcome.
that. All right, this curiosity that you were having, particularly in your younger years, did you have the time to discuss it with your parent, or did you ever talk about it? Did they ever tell you anything about it? You were talking about the different type of curiosity that you were having, like why, how come girls can do this, boys cannot do that, or boys can do this, girls cannot do this. So did you ever maybe bring the conversation up before your parent, or did you just take action without telling them
Oh,
like that?
like did I ever ask my parents? I mean, they would give me answers, but also like my parents they're both Southern. They're from like Southern culture, and a part of Southern culture is like children are to be seen, not heard. And so you don't, so it's kind of just like, okay, girl, like, no, you just can't take your clothes off, or it's just like you just can't go over there and do that. Like there was just a lot of yeah, because I wanted to know, like, I just wanted to know things and I wanted to know why I couldn't do them. How come they can do it and I can't do it? And so I was just rebellious in that aspect. And I will say, particularly with like the gender and asking questions about sex and stuff like that, my parents are Christian. I was in a Christian household. So some stuff we just didn't talk about openly. And I remember being 12. One of my earliest memories around some of that conversation is I remember being 12 years old and my mom asking me, has anybody talked to you about sex? And I was like, no. And I was like excited because I was like, oh, somebody's going to talk to me. And my mom was like, okay. And then the next day, so she didn't say anything. The next day, she came and she brought a pack of books, a pile of books to me. And she said, here you go. If you have any questions, let me know. And I was just like, oh, okay. So some of my learning has really been through books, as somebody passing me along a book. And they just didn't know what the answers were. Like I have to admit that as now that I'm a parent and my kid is asking me difficult questions, some of the things my parents were asking me, they didn't learn from their parents. So I think that I have learned that I was pushed away to a certain aspect because I was asking questions outside of their scope of knowledge too. And I think that's fine. Everybody doesn't know everything, but I was definitely a kid that was just like, I'm going to look in the encyclopedia. I'm going to look it in a book. I'm going to ask a question. And that overwhelmed my parents sometimes.
So you are 12 years old. Your mom is asking you, has somebody ever talked to you about sex? And you said no. Was that the
That was the
truth?
truth. Yeah, I didn't know. Nobody's talked to me about sex at that point. The only thing I knew about sex was that I was not supposed to have it until I was married. That's the only thing I didn't know about. Yeah, penis and vagina sex. I didn't know about any of that stuff because we were a Christian household. Nobody taught it to us. Now, we had sex ed, we had sexual health education in our schools, but it was nothing. It was just like, let's label your body parts. You have a period and don't let boys touch you. That was it. It wasn't really extensive. So I didn't really know a lot when I was younger.
Okay, now you do assess therapy for people. They definitely do ask a question, I believe. If somebody asks you, when was the first time you came to be aware of what it really means, sex? What would you say? You might hear about something, sometimes you might read about something, but you don't really know what it is until you experience it. So this is what I'm curious
Gotcha,
about.
gotcha, gotcha. How? Yeah, gotcha. So how are people in the conscious of themselves, relationships they want to have? Me.
You,
How do?
Yeah, the question is you.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm
Yeah.
46. No, I'm 2 years older than
Gotcha.
you. I still remember my first time. I still remember what happened. I still remember the moment I was trying to wool a girl. I still remember all the whole story.
Gotcha.
So
Gotcha. When was I? Okay. When was I aware? Gotcha. 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 When was I? High school. I would say high school because people around me were starting to have sex. That is when I was starting to be like, tell me more. And I was again very religious, so I was very much just like, no sex before marriage. People are not. You're not even supposed to kiss. Right? I was just like, no, I'm gonna save myself. And so I wasn't. I didn't start getting curious until high school. But I will say that I didn't. I didn't start having other conversations until I got to college. It was I would say I was starting, and because then it was like there was no parental oversight. My parents run around. I lived with my other. I ran track, so I lived with like my other track team members. Um, we were close with the football team, right? Like we started to, you start to be an adult in your own right, and so even then I was still a part of like a Christian athlete group. So I would say I didn't really have I always had a steady boyfriend. Like I was always in a relationship, but I didn't really start having I didn't really start exploring sex maybe until I got to college. It took a while. I was a late bloomer. Let me say that. Whatever, if you want to say late bloomer, but according to the timeline here in the United States, I was well into adulthood before I started exploring at all because I was that afraid of religion.
okay, did it change anything in you?
Did it change anything in me?
Yeah.
Oh, these are good questions, by the way. Did it change anything? I, I would say the I wasn't as I wasn't as I thought I was going to be more interested in it. Maybe I should say that. Maybe after I was just like, oh, that's all. Like this is it. But I think where I started to gain interest, maybe I should say, is when I was actually able to explore other aspects of sexuality. So when I started to talk to other people about their experiences, again, when I was older and I was starting to go out in public, when I started to read different books, I think then I started to have a different appreciation. And I do that now, even in reflection of my own like sex therapy, or when I'm talking, particularly to teenagers, when they're just like, I am ready to have sex, and I'm like, let's talk about expectations, right? Like your first time isn't always going to be over the moon. There's going to be stars. It's a galaxy. Sometimes it's just you're learning, and you start off somewhere so you can learn, and then this is where you have conversations with your partner. This is where you learn about your own body. I didn't get all those talks when I was younger, so yeah, I would say like the first time I was just like, oh, okay, well that's it. But I don't think it wasn't until I was older and an older adult with more knowledge until I was just like, oh, there is a way to get pleasure out of this. Like this is can be pleasurable. But I think you have to be a little bit more mature for those conversations, I would say.
All right. There is a learning curve. All right. That's interesting.
Yeah.
That's interesting. Why do you do sex therapy for people?
Why do I? Out of the same reason I just talked about, nobody talked to me about it when I was younger. Even though I appreciated my mom giving me those books or giving me that opportunity, why I do sex therapy, particularly in an inclusive and a diverse way for my population of folks, is because I want them to have the information. I want them to have pleasure. I want things to feel comfortable. I want them to ask questions. I want them to ask these questions to their doctor. There's all these things that I want people to do for themselves, and they just don't know because we just don't have a great educational system to teach them that. So that's why I do sex therapy. I want to pass that information to people who I'm working with.
Thank you so much for that. I really appreciate that. This information that you carry with you, what does it mean for you in what you do today?
It's just a part of me, right? Like I think one thing I saw particularly about your podcast is like you like thinking about like legacy and like ancestral like things like passing on things from one place to another. And I feel like right now in my period of time with my career and being a mom and moving forward, like I want to instill things that I'm leaving behind for the next generation. So whether it's about sex therapy, whether it's about social work, whether it's about clinical education, my moving forward is leaving things behind, publishing books, writing articles, doing podcasts like this, right? Like this is going to live on somewhere. Somewhere across the world is going to see this and going to say, like, I want to do that too. And I'm like, that's awesome. That's what I want. So yeah, I think like my baggage or my luggage that I take with me is really also like I'm leaving behind thank you notes and I'm leaving behind love notes and I'm leaving behind lessons. I'm leaving behind lessons around sex, right? I'm leaving behind lessons around pleasure. And I'm just hoping that in the next 20, 30, 150 years, somebody will take those lessons and pass it on to somebody else.
This has really been a very beautiful conversation.
Thank you. This was awesome.